It's finally happened. For over a decade, the Star Wars fandom has felt less like a community and more like a battlefield, a constant tug-of-war between the legacy of George Lucas and the corporate direction of Disney. But yesterday, the news that shattered the internet wasn't another movie announcement, and it wasn't another cancellation, it was the end of an era. After 13 years at the helm, Kathleen Kennedy, the woman handpicked by George Lucas himself, is officially stepping down from Lucasfilm. If you've been following the behind-the-scenes drama, you know this moment has been rumored, speculated about, and predicted for years. But now that it's actually here, the reality is far more interesting than the headlines suggest. This isn't just an executive retiring, this is a complete restructuring of the most famous franchise in movie history. The Civil War inside Lucasfilm is officially over, and the winner is the one man fans have been rooting for since the beginning. But before we celebrate, we need to ask the real question: is this the fresh start Star Wars needs, or have we just traded one set of problems for another? Disney is framing this announcement with all the polite, corporate language you'd expect. Bob Iger called Kennedy a visionary filmmaker, and Kennedy herself spoke about the privilege of leading the studio. But if you know anything about how Hollywood actually works, you know that the timing and the structure of this transition tell a completely different story. This wasn't just a simple resignation, it looks a lot more like a calculated changing of the guard. Here is the key detail that most mainstream outlets are glossing over: Bob Iger didn't just replace Kennedy with another suit. He fundamentally split the throne. The role of leading Lucasfilm has been divided into two distinct powers. On the business side, you have Lin Brennan, a longtime Lucasfilm veteran who will handle the operations. But on the creative side, the keys to the galaxy have been handed to Dave Filoni. This is a massive shift. For the first time in the Disney era, the business and the art are being separated, and that specific decision signals that Disney finally understands what went wrong over the last decade. They realized that you can't run Star Wars like a standard corporation. You need someone who actually understands the Force. To understand why this shift is so seismic, we have to look at the confusing, chaotic legacy Kennedy leaves behind. It's easy for critics to say she ruined Star Wars, but if we look at the cold, hard facts, the picture is a lot more complicated. On paper, her tenure was a massive financial success. Under her watch, the franchise brought in billions of dollars. The Force Awakens shattered records, becoming one of the highest-grossing films of all time. She oversaw the launch of The Mandalorian, which single-handedly carried Disney Plus for its first few years. But money didn't buy loyalty. While the box office numbers were high, the cultural capital of Star Wars was plummeting. The sequel trilogy started strong but ended with a divided fanbase that is still arguing to this day. Rogue One is largely considered the only masterpiece of the era, yet reports suggest it was plagued by massive reshoots and production trouble. Kennedy proved she could make money, but she struggled to maintain the magic. The franchise became profitable, but it also became exhausting. And for a brand that relies on nostalgia and love, exhaustion is a death sentence. If there was one defining characteristic of the Kennedy era, it wasn't the Jedi, it was the firing of directors. Lucasfilm under her leadership wasn't just a studio, it became known as a revolving door for creative talent. We saw directors like Lord and Miller fired from Solo mid-production. We saw Colin Trevorrow let go from Episode 9 before he could even finish a draft. We saw Josh Trank's project disintegrate before it even started. This constant churn created an atmosphere of instability. It felt like no vision was safe unless it fit a very specific, corporate mold. Rumors have circulated for years that top-tier directors in Hollywood became terrified of taking a Star Wars job, fearing they'd be micromanaged or fired. This director graveyard damaged the studio's reputation within the industry. It wasn't just fans who were frustrated, it seemed like the creators were too. When you have announced trilogies from people like Rian Johnson or movies from Kevin Feige that just quietly vanish into the ether, it paints a picture of a ship without a rudder. So, why now? Why, after surviving the backlash of The Last Jedi and the box office bomb of Solo, is she leaving now? Well, the last 2 years likely sealed the deal. We can't ignore the massive underperformance of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. That was a film designed to be a guaranteed hit, a nostalgic victory lap for Harrison Ford, but it struggled to break even. Then came the streaming wars. While The Mandalorian was a hit, other projects faced steep declines in viewership. The cancellation of The Acolyte after just one season was a massive public blow. It wasn't just that the show was divisive, it was that it cost a fortune and yielded almost no cultural impact. Disney is currently in a phase of aggressive cost-cutting and quality control. They simply couldn't afford another 5 years of announced but never released movies and expensive streaming flops. The writing was on the wall. Disney needed a win, and to get that win, they had to turn to the past. This leads us to the man of the hour, Dave Filoni. For years, comment sections across YouTube have been flooded with the same phrase, "Fire Kathleen, hire Filoni." It became a mantra. And incredibly, Disney actually listened. Filoni isn't just an executive, he is the literal apprentice of George Lucas. He stood by George's side during the creation of the Clone Wars, absorbing the lore, the philosophy, and the visual language of the original creator. Promoting Filoni to Chief Creative Officer isn't just a promotion, it's a signal to the hardcore fans. It's Disney saying, "We hear you. We are putting the one guy in charge who actually cares about the lore as much as you do." Filoni has proven he can bridge the gap between the old and the new. He brought back Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian, he finished the Clone Wars properly, and he successfully brought animated characters into live action. He is the safety net. But that doesn't mean this is going to be smooth sailing. Before we pop the champagne, there is a massive risk here that everyone is ignoring. Dave Filoni is a fantastic storyteller, but is he a good studio head? There is a legitimate criticism that Filoni tends to play favorites with his own creations. If you look at his recent work, it often feels like he's shrinking the galaxy down to just the characters he created: Ahsoka, Bo-Katan, the Rebels crew. There is a danger that Star Wars could go from being corporate and soulless to being insular and niche. A franchise this big needs variety. It needs new voices, new eras, and new styles. If Filoni turns every movie and show into a sequel to his cartoons, general audiences might tune out. He has to prove that he can shepherd other people's visions, not just his own. This is where Lin-Wen Brennan's role becomes crucial. She has to keep the business running so Filoni doesn't get bogged down in budgets and logistics, allowing him to focus purely on the story. Kathleen Kennedy's departure marks the closing of the most turbulent chapter in Star Wars history. She took a franchise that was dormant and turned it into a content machine, for better or worse. But now, the keys belong to the next generation. The Civil War is over. The creative battle has been won by the Filoni camp. But now the real work begins. We don't just need announcements, we need good movies. We need stories that unite the fanbase rather than divide it. The excuse of corporate interference is gone. If the next era of Star Wars fails, there's no one left to blame. So, what do you think? Do you trust Dave Filoni to fix the timeline and restore the glory days, or do you think the damage to the brand is already permanent? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button. I'll see you in the next one.